All right, last chance to come grab a seat. There's a few seats left up front. You want to be front row for this?
We got a packed house. It's great.
Thank you.
Still seats in the front if you're looking for a spot. Yeah, come on up.
We'll cut this part out of the recording.
We are live streaming, so this is a great virtual event as well as an in-person. So thanks everyone for coming.
Broadcasting all around the world.
Yes.
Maybe.
If you're live, you know, it's live. You could link up.
Exactly. So listen, thank you everyone for getting out here on a rainy morning. It tells us how important this topic is. Apparently, LABC had to actually cut off RSVPs for this event because it was getting oversold. We weren't sure we could fit everybody. I think maybe some more people will trickle in because of the weather, but thank you very much for coming in early on a Wednesday morning. Los Angeles Gensler's office is really excited to be able to host this event. I see some familiar faces here, but for those who don't know me, I'm John Adams. I am a co-regional managing principal for the Southwest region. I sit here in Los Angeles. I'm an Angelino. I was born and raised here. Seen the city go through a lot of changes, good and right now some challenges that we're working through. But it's a really interesting time. And this topic around decarbonization is incredibly important. A lot of you in this room are associated with sort of designing or building or engineering or marketing or selling the built environment, buildings, which account for 43% of the greenhouse emissions, at least in this part of the world. So it's a really, really important sector to be focused on. Even more than like transportation, you think about trucks, you think about airplanes, buildings actually are more responsible for greenhouse gases than all of that combined. So this is really important. And this event today is fantastic because we're going to have experts from the green building space, policymakers, design experts, and utility representatives speaking about the policies, the incentive programs, the regulations that are coming, and design strategies to really help mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions in our region and in the building sector. So you're going to learn a lot, and we have some incredible people as part of the program that I'm going to pass off to Jill, one of my many bosses here, to talk about.
Thank you, John. You guys, we're so thrilled to have the LABC and all of you join us in our LA office. We've been looking forward to having events live again. So thank you for taking the time this morning to join us. The panels today are two exciting panels. We're going to divide them into two 30-minute sections. So we're going to have Mary Leslie lead the first panel. She's the president of the LABC. We're going to go for about 30 minutes. Then we're going to go to the second panel, which is going to be led by Ben Stapleton of the Los Angeles chapter of the U.S. Green Building Council. Thank you. Thanks, Anthony. So this is just going to be a great morning. We're going to be able to hear two different sessions. We'll take a quick break in the middle, right at the 9 o'clock hour, and we'll just keep going. So Mary, Leslie, come on up. Thank you. Mics are live, so I want to make sure you guys are all hooked up. Okay, rearrange the furniture because it's an LABC event. Rachel said it's not an LABC event if you don't rearrange the furniture right at the end. There you go. Welcome. Come on in. So happy to have you. District 4, right? Perfect. Make yourself at home. Plenty of coffee and beverages. If you guys need anything, restrooms are off to the side this way. So enjoy your morning and take it away, Mary.
Thank you. Oh, and I have to make sure. Yeah, there you go. Okay, I think we did it. Hello. Okay. Okay, good morning. And for the brave people that made it here in the deluge, we're so happy to see you this morning. We hope you got coffee, water, and a pastry. We're here at Jill and John's headquarters for Gensler here in Southern California. And you can see what superior design it is and what a treat it is to be here. And we want to thank them. And not only thanking them for having us here, but actually I was trying to decide if it was 1 decade or 2, but I have a bad feeling it's 2 decades that they have led on sustainability and sustainable design. So thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause. I also want to thank Jason Barrett. He's the Senior Vice President of Sales for GAF Energy. Where's Jason? Jason, raise your hand. Jason's our sponsor this morning. And as important as that, Jason is helping be responsible for the fact that LA is the #1 solar city in America. And a lot of that has to do with his creative financing early on. So let's give Jason a big round of applause. I also want to thank Ben Stapleton, the executive director of USGBC. See, I'm going to say the acronym, not the full name, for moderating the next panel and for all the panel participants that are coming next. We have a great group today, but we are so honored to have Councilmember Nithya Raman with us today because she is really a leader in the council. And even though she's only been there since 2020, it feels like you've been there a decade, okay? Because you're getting a lot done quickly. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way.
A long 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. They're dog years. So it's really 14 years. Okay. So anyway, she represents Council District 4. That goes, for those of you who don't know, that goes from Encino to Silver Lake to Reseda. It's a very big geographic district. As I said before, she's been there since 2020 and she has tons of firsts. She's the first woman that was elected to this district. She's the first Asian American and the first South Asian American woman to be elected to Council District 4. So that's a lot of firsts. And since joining the council, she has prioritized delivering, and I love how you describe this, compassionate and effective services for people experiencing homelessness, because that's quite a thoughtful sentence all by itself. And she also is focused on building more affordable housing and moving with greater urgency, of course, to meet our climate goals, which we're going to talk about today. We're honored to have her here today with Osama Yunan. Osama really needs no introduction. He's the general manager for building and safety. He has been since 2020, but really he's a 36-year veteran, 36-year veteran. Right. Let's give him a round of applause. Yeah. And I have to say, the one thing that people know about Osama and what I think is extraordinary about him is that he still exhibits a really high level of excellence and enthusiasm for what he does. And we really appreciate that, Osama. So also he has achieved many very important things. And I think this is understated, but I'll say it anyway. He was a contributor to the California Green Building Standards Code. I think he actually wrote it and they just basically copied it, but okay. And he subsequently led the development and adoption of the LA Green Building Code and created the LADBS Green Building Division. So thank you, Osama. So today, go ahead. So this morning we have about 30 minutes for this first section, and we're going to focus in on building decarb. And as John said, buildings produce about 43% of our greenhouse emissions. That's more than any other sector. And thanks to Councilmember Rahman, we have now passed legislation to require all new buildings to be fully electric. Now, we are joining 58 other cities who have fully or partially done the same thing, and we will be doing even more. As you know, Governor Newsom and the California Energy Commission, I think we have somebody from the California Energy Commission here today. Right up there, raise your hand. Thank you for being here. Has committed to Californians installing 6 million heat pumps by 2030. We're currently at 500,000. And in September, the Air Resources Board basically banned the sale of natural gas powered space heaters and water heating appliances by 2030. And as you know, since 2019, which makes Jonathan and Jason happy, the city required all new residential construction to have solar systems or the ability to create them. So with that overview, I'm going to start with some questions. I'm going to start with you, Council Member Ronan. The past year, you authored and successfully passed this new ordinance prohibiting natural gas hookups in new construction. This will take effect April 1 for everyone except affordable housing that has till June 1, apparently. And so why this ordinance now, and how is it going to help us meet our goals?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. It's a really exciting crowd to be in. I'm an urban planner by training, and there was a lot of architects and urban planners when I was studying. So it's always exciting for me to be in a group of people, I think, who share the same passions for policymaking, for beauty, and for solving problems that I miss from my urban planning days. So I'm really, really happy to be here today. I think that this, to me, the reason why we introduced this really needs no explanation, particularly to this group. As you said, 58 other cities were already doing it. Los Angeles, a city that prides itself on environmental kind of forward thinking, its environmental forward thinking approach in many ways was behind the ball on this issue. And so this was something I talked about when I was running for office. And when I got into office, I told Josh, my legislative director who's here, this seems really straightforward. Let's make this happen. And after I said that, we worked on it for a year before we introduced the ordinance. And the reason it took that long was because we knew that unless we were able to make sure that any new legislation around this issue that met the urgency of the moment, because right now we have a lot of progress still to make on achieving our climate resiliency goals. And we have really no low-hanging fruit left, right? So this is one of those steps that I think is going to be challenging for the city to do. It's not as challenging as the next step, which is retrofitting existing buildings, but it is going to be really challenging for the city to do. It's going to have to be something new that builders and architects think about in the city. And yet it's something that it was essential to do. But we also had to bring a lot of other people on board with these new ideas. We had to make sure that some of the challenges and kind of concerns that labor had with what this change would mean for their future were assuaged and addressed in the crafting of the legislation. We had to make sure that when it was inevitably assigned to 6 different committees in the city council, that all of those committee chairs were on board with it and knew that this was something that really demanded that it be responded to with urgency. And so I think we did a huge amount of work in the building and outside of the building to get people on board with it. We changed the way in which we were thinking about how we would introduce the ordinance to address some of those concerns. And then we were able to put it forward and have it move fairly quickly through council because of the legwork that we'd done. So we were really, really grateful to have been able to do it at that time and at that moment.
That's terrific. And I assume that you had a stakeholder process where you talked to the industry. Do you feel like the industry's ready to comply and April 1st is realistic?
Well, I think the thing that we learned through that stakeholder engagement process was that for many people, this was a welcome change because all electric buildings, from the research that we saw and from the experience of builders that we spoke to, was actually cheaper than installing gas lines. And so I think for a lot of people, they were already thinking about this as a means of cost cutting and obviously achieving our shared environmental goals. And I think we're really ready for this to be the next step for Los Angeles. And I think the question is really just how do we adapt our practices? How do we make sure that we have the knowledge to be able to build and continue to build at the scale that we need to?
Good, that's great. General Manager Union, how does your ordinance compare with the other 58 cities in California?
Good morning, everybody. And I'm really honored to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it. I'm also honored to be alongside Council Member Rahman, who really inspired me during this process. So thank you again. So the first thing we did when we were tasked with this ordinance is actually compare what other cities have done. We didn't need to reinvent the wheel. Also, we wanted to make sure whatever we did has been tested and tried and is successful somewhere else. And as you mentioned, Mayor, there were over 50 cities that done it already, and we looked at them, and they all were about the same. Electrification, some exemptions for ADUs, some exemptions for special manufacturing processes, restaurants, of course. cooking equipment in restaurants, I should clarify. And really, we followed alongside of that. Our biggest deviation was maybe the attached ADUs. We give an exemption to that. But we were consistent with the other cities. And April 1st is around the corner. We were not getting a whole lot of people saying, I can't do it. As a matter of fact, even before the ordinance kicked in, we're already seeing fully electric buildings. So we're fully optimistic and expecting this will be a very smooth process.
So thanks to Gensler and others, the design has already occurred. So we're building these zero electric buildings as well. So what kind of incentives do owners who make this decision to build electric, what can they look forward to?
That's a great question. And before we talk about incentives, I just want to clarify something. Had the city done absolutely nothing, the energy code, which is a state code, the 22 energy code, which became effective January 1st, had already in place that single family dwellings, multifamily dwellings have to be electric ready, which means they had to have the panel capacity, the wiring for their water heaters, dryers, and so forth. So it wasn't like it's a huge step. It was almost there. This just made it more complete. With that, incentives are important. We do need to help owners with the cost of it. And in our report back to City Council, we did say that we do recommend that DWP align their incentive program with this ordinance so they go together. And since the passage of this ordinance, actually DWP and Building and Safety and the Mayor's Office meet periodically to talk about incentives and how they're going to align together. It's really important that the incentives do take into account things like heat pumps, like electric water heaters. Somebody wants to upgrade their electric panel. I think they should be incentivized, and that will get us towards the next goal.
Thank you. I'm raising the mic up. Thank you, Osama. That's helpful. And we'll be hearing David Jaco and Edison is on the next panel. So I'm sure they'll talk more about that. So what happens next, Osama? There's a report back in council right now about the next phase requiring existing buildings, as the council member just said, to comply with this new ordinance. What is your thought about that? What will that look like? No, but I'm asking him to speculate on what he thinks it might look like.
Okay, so existing buildings is a little bit more challenging than you, as you can imagine. So I think we need to think about it in two ways. The big buildings like this one, over 20,000, we already have a program in the city's energy efficiency program that owners, existing building energy and water efficiency program, where owners already are reporting. So we could use that program and transform it and modify it to achieve the city's goal for carbon and energy efficiency. And that's not a huge jump because we already have the system in place. We have the employees, they're doing the work. So it's just modifying the ordinance to make it align with the city's goals. At the same time, I mean, this is not something insignificant. It is significant. These buildings, over 20,000, they're actually 3% of the inventory of the buildings in the city, but they're responsible for over 30% of the emissions. So addressing that gives us a big chunk. And again, it's relatively easy for the city to do because we already have a program in place. The other part, you're talking about single family dwellings, other buildings, it's a little bit tougher, but you got to address it if you do want to go carbon neutral, because single family dwellings are responsible for over 40% of carbon emissions. But there's a challenge there, and that is money. It's going to cost money to upgrade the panels, to run the wires. A typical upgrade in a house, it could go anywhere between $2,500 to $3,500. Who's going to pay for that? So we need to look for funding opportunities. There's the IRA funding that has money in it, but the city needs to come up with some funding mechanisms to help owners. There are almost 700,000 single family dwellings in the city. So you're talking, and the majority of them are pre-1978. So you should expect that they need an upgrade. So you're talking about close to $2 billion for that kind of effort. So we need to look at that. Once that effort, and there are cities that funded upgrades. Once you do that, there's other programs that can be used, like end of life use. Once your gas electric heater goes out, put an electric in, but you got to have the infrastructure in place. So I think this is where we need to go. I think it's got to be two separate phases or two separate efforts parallel, because one is way more difficult than the other.
Does the PACE program, is that applicable to paying for this?
I'm not sure if PACE actually pays for free.
No, but it allows you to borrow against your home or your property to do energy efficiency upgrades. So I'm thinking it might apply to this as well. And I'm curious, what do other cities do? How do they finance it?
So PACE is definitely one option other cities have taken. And I think it's going to be one of those all of the above options. But I think looking at IRA would be a good thing to do, because that's just money you can, it's like free funding.
Speaking of the federal government funding.
Right. I mean, DWP could look at incentivizing the panel upgrade too. I think this is going to be the biggest challenge of it. Where is the money going to come from?
Yeah, and I want to just say also that I think when we're talking about multifamily buildings, that challenge of who pays, who bears the costs for these upgrades is going to be so important. We are obviously, one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be in the role that I am right now is because I think Los Angeles faces this challenge of desperately needing to build more housing. And, we need more of it everywhere at every income level. And we have to find ways to make it cheaper and easier to build that housing. But we also have a tremendous amount of old building stock where some of our lowest income residents live. And if we're putting, very expensive retrofit requirements on these buildings, I fear what will happen if those costs are passed on to tenants who are already facing incredible rent burdens here, who are already, we're seeing large numbers of people leaving Los Angeles because of the cost of living here. And we're obviously seeing the impacts of that on our city streets. And so I think we have a very, very narrow path that we have to walk in order to be able to move forward on this. And for me, multifamily buildings are going to be the most challenging for us to take on, because we want to make sure that we can meet our climate goals. We want to make sure that those families are able to enjoy the safety and clean air that comes from having an electric stove. But we also want to make sure that they can continue to afford to live in those homes. And I think that's just going to be very challenging. And I think it's going to require intensive engagement with landlords in those units. It's going to require intensive engagement with how we think about financing those. And we have to be very, very thoughtful as we move forward. So,
but you think it's appropriate to have some form of government subsidy that will support that?
I think we have to. I think we have to find those dollars. We have to find it from wherever we can find it. But I think we just have to be very, very cautious as we move forward.
Because you made the point, under new construction, you can control the design up front. It will be a more efficient building. It will cost less to maintain and operate it. So it's a good thing. But when you're going back to retrofit, it's a completely different deal, because you're dealing with some very old buildings that could be quite costly.
Yeah. And we're dealing with this, like the old building issue is such a big challenge here in Los Angeles. Like we have major habitability issues in that overlaps with all of our most affordable housing, whether it is RSO units where people have lived there for many, many years. So the costs have stayed low for those rents. That is some of the cheapest housing that we have. And yet those buildings are in sometimes very, very bad shape. And I think some of those landlords are struggling to make the repairs that they need because repairs are expensive, costs have ballooned. And so we have a crisis there where you don't want to increase costs for those tenants, but we also have to make sure that their habitability concerns are being addressed. And adding another layer of costs on top of that could intensify those challenges, which we're already seeing through the housing department complaints that we're getting. So I think this is it's a scary moment in many ways for some of our most affordable housing stock. because of the immense challenges that we have ahead in upgrading those very old buildings.
Well, I think you're raising a really good point about the multifamily apartment buildings or just owners of buildings in general, because we were at BOMA a couple of months ago and I, at one point I'm looking at these owners of buildings and I'm thinking to myself, do you realize you're on first now? Right? That you are the ones that are going to have to absorb the transition and make the transition, right? And I'm not sure building owners think of themselves that way as leading the revolution here of getting us to zero climate, or reducing carbon. And so I think there is a pretty good education curve that should be directed at owners. And I think people like Gensler that are here today, they're dealing with the owners every day. So that education is going on. I'm pretty sure they're performing that regularly, explaining what the goals and objectives are. And you're going to be hearing from them later, and they're going to talk about that. And part of the help with that is there's a lot of innovative new technology that can bring the costs down that we are now bringing on board, right? And something we talked about that a little earlier is part of what the city will have to do, council member, is bring on the innovative new technologies that help reduce the costs so that you don't have to finance this so highly. So I'm kind of curious to that end, what are we thinking? What are we seeing that's new that can help? Is there any new technologies or innovative processes that will help us with this zero carbon?
Well, I'm kind of curious about how that support would be most usefully provided to our developer and builder community, as long as we have this incredible audience here. I mean, what can we do to make this as easy as possible for you?
Well, we have experts, RP.
Of course, Mary. I have a question, Osama. Since we handle a lot of this high rise. Oh, okay. Thank you for being here. I have a question. Since we do a lot of this, let's talk about the existing buildings, which is the most challenging for us right now. Is there a threshold when this will kick in? Let's say we're doing some tenants in these high-rise buildings. You know how thresholds and triggers, right? Is there something that will trigger this for existing buildings? As little by little, they're going to do it eventually, of course. So we handle the interior aspect of it, which is easier. But as far as let's say the heat pumps, the coolers, all of that, which is financially impossible. As you can see, a lot of these buildings right now are empty, about 25–30%, and they're going into receivership. So it's quite a bit of a burden. Thanks.
Thank you, RP. That's a good question. We're still trying to figure all this out. But if you look at other cities like Boston, New York, what they've done with their existing buildings is they put a cap. It's like every 5 years, whatever the period is, you got to show an improvement in carbon emissions or energy reduction. And they have that over a period of years where at the end of that period, they've achieved their goal. Other cities have looked at like major tenant improvements. So whenever you do a major project over a certain amount of money, sorry, I've done that before. Yeah. Yeah, other cities have looked at tenant improvements when it's really big, and big is all, you got to define what big is, and then you got to maybe do all electric at that point. So there are strategies that other cities have done that we're looking at.
Yes. The orange purse on the end.
Hi, I'm Marika, Green Economy. We do a lot of benchmarking, as you know, Osama, in the city of LA. And one of the problems we encounter, I talk to a lot of owners, a lot of multifamily owners in the Valley, in your district, Councilwoman. And one of the issues is, frankly, there's no stick. So if you don't comply with EBW, which is what you were talking about, it costs $202. So, which frankly, versus an audit or even doing proper benchmarking is nothing. So I feel very strongly that, yes, New York has a big stick, right? It's coming. That stick is big and people are going to have to pay. But the city of LA is never going to get anywhere unless there's a big stick, because there are so many people that don't comply, because the $202 fine for enforcement of the city of LA's EBW ordinance is nothing. So what are we doing about that?
That one.
Yeah, and I think this is something that's been brought up before, and that decision included, of course, our city attorney, what the city can or cannot do. But New York is a good model for us. So is Boston, as a matter of fact. And that's something we need to look at as we work on this motion that's in place.
Let's not forget that. It's not going to work out.
Yeah, you need to. I think that's our time is up for this portion, but Jonathan, we'll let you have the last question.
So the question so great to have an urban planner on the council. Great to have an urban planner on the council. I'm one of myself doing business. It's always been the dream of urban planners to make a contribution to society. So thank you very much for your service. Of course, Osama, your services goes without saying. You've been so dedicated to the city. Big question is I look at decarbonization and retrofits, kind of like the start was like low flush toilets. There was incentives. Now you have to have it. Is there the concept like, we'll throw some incentives out there for a while going with your 5-year plan. And then it's like, that's just a cost of doing business. You just got to have it in the city. Where's the start and stop of that from your guys' perspective?
For existing construction?
Yeah, for existing, tackling this first obstacle that you mentioned. How do you clamp down on that so that we have this, that we just get this done? Same thing like low flush toilets. That's how I look at it as a planner.
Well, the good news about low flush toilets, because I was on the Department of Water and Power board at the time,
There you go.
is that they greatly they kept our water use at the same levels for 20 years, literally. So I don't think complying with a low flush toilet, and there was an incentive by DWP that when you invested in one, you got to check back. It became standard. You're right. At first they had to incentivize it, and then it kind of just, that's how we did business. And everybody accepted it. And it had enormous implications with our water use. We held the same level for at least 20 years. I don't know how we're doing right now, but that was very important.
And I
analogy.
could add that, and typically if you go to the history of the city and regulations in general, usually it takes a regulation to start something, but then the market adjusts. And what would be expensive at the beginning of the regulation becomes the mainstream. And that's what the market is. And that I would expect that to happen here. Regulations are good as a transformation tool to transfer, but technology out there, the private sector is just amazing in what they can do. And they always have stepped up to the plate. And I don't see that changing.
That's a very positive note to end on. But council member, do you have a last thought for us about your overall vision for climate, meeting our climate goals?
Yeah, I mean, I just think I'm grateful for this kind of forum and for the capacity, for increasing the capacity of the city to engage with people who are actually practicing the work that needs to happen. Because I think we can't make bad regulations. We can't afford to make bad regulations right now. We have to make sure that what we're putting together is going to get us to the goals that we need to get to in an ambitious way with the appropriate sticks in place, without placing that undue burden or having those unforeseen consequences. And I think we can't do it in that building alone. We have to be out here talking to all of you. So thank you for this.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, so let's give our speakers a round of applause.
Thanks, everybody. We are going to take a 2-minute break. We're going to do a quick costume change. I like costume changes. We're going to do a quick stage set change, and we will be right back. So grab another piece of coffee. What's a piece of coffee? Grab another pastry and a cup of coffee. you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I've been talking about building decarbonization for the last 48 hours. I lost my voice yesterday. I was talking so much. So I had tea here, and I'm going to try to make it through. And the reason I've been talking about building decarb so much is that buildings account for 43% of our greenhouse gas emissions here in the city of LA. And we can't move forward with fighting climate change without addressing buildings. And the reason I've been talking so much about it is because of the good work that Osama and Councilmember Rahman have been doing. We're finally starting to make the change that we need to around buildings here in the city. So I'm really excited for the panel we have today, which represents a well-rounded segment of what's moving buildings forward. So with that, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves and talk about their role when it comes to building decarbonization. Anthony?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to our office today. My name is Anthony Brower. I'm the Global Climate Action and Sustainability Practice Area Leader for Gensler. I've been with Gensler about 20 years. I've also been within LA. I moved here from New York. I'm not trying to take over anything. Here from New York about 10 years ago. It's been a great city to kind of flourish in. It's been amazing. My role in decarbonization is from two ends. So I have a team of about 100 practitioners around the firm who are working on analytics. How are we helping quantify carbon from both an operational and what I call upfront carbon or material carbon point of view, as well as working with design teams on what are those critical design moves we can make at the very beginning of projects that can actually start influencing projects in the right direction.
David?
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Jaco, Director of Efficiency Solutions at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. I run the energy efficiency programs, our building electrification efforts. I work with the electric transportation and also emerging technologies around tying all those together. We're really excited in seeing these multiple distributed energy resource strategies come to bear to help us decarbonize our grid at the same time we're decarbonizing buildings. And I think that's important. You know, when you talk about decarbonizing buildings, there's the electricity whose carbon mix kind of comes from the utility, and then there's the on-site combustion, usually natural gas. Well, we're under mandate to decarbonize the grid by 2035. So for the electric side of your buildings, we got that one. That's us. We want to work with you on energy efficiency, and that helps your bills. But where it really gets to the building decarbonization that's actually being emitted by the building itself on site, that is natural gas combustion, maybe propane. And that's where we're taking an increasingly leading role in helping our customers make that transition.
Michelle?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. Michelle Thomas. I'm the Principal Manager of Building Electrification with Southern California Edison. And as my title implies, I am the manager of our building electrification programs. Southern California Edison in 2019, we released a framework for our carbon neutral future called Pathway 2045. And one of the legs of that three-pronged stool was building electrification along with transportation electrification and greening our grid. So my team works on developing building electrification programs. I also have codes and standards in my shop. And so we are really excited to talk about our future and some of the things we have planned in building electrification.
Jason?
The good news is that I'm quite loquacious. So the fact that I don't have a mic is actually, that was by design. So first of all, super excited to be here. I am joining you from, I was at the InfoCast Solar Finance Conference yesterday, and I can tell you the amount of energy and financial dollars that are being thrust around in renewable energy was super exciting to be there. I came from there last night. I'm from the East Coast, so I commiserate with my friend who's from New York. I live in New Jersey. Always great to be in LA. I share two roles. So my current role is I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales for GIF Energy. I also am one of the founding partners of our investment business. We've invested in over $2 billion project value of deals. I can say that a good percentage of that has been in Los Angeles. I'm looking at Jonathan Port in front of me and some of my other partners. I see Gerardo back there. We invested in the largest, at one point was the largest solar roof, commercial roof in the world. It was the Port of LA. So I always want to give a shout out to my fellow partners. The role I facilitate, so I'm a recovering investment banker. And the role I facilitate now is we have this brand new product. I'll get into it a little bit more. But it's when I think about solar and I think about decarbonization, your roof can play a major role in that. And as the program goes on, I'll give you some more perspective on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank our panelists and thank Mary and the LA Business Council for having us here today. I serve as the executive director for the U.S. Green Building Council, Los Angeles. We're an independent nonprofit, really focused on leveraging the built environment as an entry point to transform Southern California into a more sustainable region for all. I want to give a shout out to have a number of board members here in the audience and some past board members next to me, looking over my shoulder. This is a really critical issue for us at a critical time. I go to a lot of these conferences and we talk about all the great work we're doing when it comes to sustainability, and that's great. We need to be doing that. But I also think it's important to recenter ourselves and realize that globally emissions went up last year. Emissions are going to go up this year, and we have a significant amount of work to do. It's important for us to collaborate and work together to accelerate the change we need. So to start, Jason, GAF is primarily known for being the leading roofing manufacturer in the US. You guys also make a lot of cool pavement products. I just want to point that out. We deal with extreme heat issues, and GAF is one of the leaders there as well. We're not here to talk about extreme heat. We're here to talk about building decarb, which actually is related, but that's a topic for another time. But the company recently began operations in the renewable energy business. Given the conference you were at yesterday, tell us a little about the trends you're seeing when it comes to rooftop solar, cost savings to be had for both the contract and the customer, and specifically when it comes to building decarb, what is the role that solar and storage need to play as we decarbonize our buildings?
So the example I use is when I fly into LA and you see all of that barren space, and the barren space from a firm that is the largest waterproof in the world is your rooftop. Your rooftop really is real estate that can be used to facilitate decarbonization. And so what we did is, again, I keep telling everyone I was a recovering investment banker finance guy, and now I'm at the core heart of manufacturing. GAF Energy is a business. It's an operating company of Standard Industries. We're headquartered in California. We have a manufacturing facility in California. Hopefully that says good things because we're creating jobs in California. What we did is we took the best of the photovoltaic technology and we combined it with material science. Now, I'm not here to say anything negative about rack-mounted solar. I think there is a place for it and it makes sense. But there are about 5 million re-roofs that take place a year in the United States. And 80% of that represents asphalt shingle roofing. We have a third of the market share. So we think the best time, and I think you will agree with me, to get solar is when you're getting a brand new roof. The solar should be coterminous with the life of the roof. It doesn't make sense to put solar on a roof and all of a sudden you have to replace the roof in 2 years. That makes no sense. So what we did is we created a product. It's called Timberline Solar. I will show this to you. It's the first nailable solar shingle that's out there. Again, I have a marketing team that can tell you all the wonderful awards. I think we won like 30 awards, Popular Science, Good Housekeeping, the list goes on and on. But what's important is you can walk in it. So this nails directly to the roof deck. If you go to a traditional solar panel and it's a rack mounted system, you cannot stand on it. So while you're putting in your roof, so this right here is actually, in its very simplistic form, it is a building product. It's actually certified as a building product and it's nailable. And it goes on at the same level, the same time. So if you were to put this on and you didn't electrify it, it would meet the same waterproofing standards as your roof, as the asphalt shingles around it. So again, solar makes a lot of sense, et cetera, but one of the beauties or one of the challenges or the unintended consequences is if you put a rack-mounted system on and you don't waterproof it accordingly, it could be porous and it can create a deleterious outcome. In other words, you have a leaky roof. So what we've tried to do is take the best in what we consider to be photovoltaic technology, the best in waterproofing, and we've combined it. And more importantly, what we're doing is we're facilitating this in the US. So this is all US-based manufacturing.
Thank you, Jason. And we hosted actually a panel last week, really looking at green building as part of the solution to the housing crisis. And one of the things that really came out of that for us is not just that Elon Musk is not the only person with a solar shingle, and maybe probably not the best one, I would guess, but that really solar is an integrated and important part of how we approach reducing long-term costs for affordable housing and for other housing. So it's critical as we look at decarbonization. How do we integrate some of these new technologies? Anthony, Gensler is one of the leading global architecture firms. You have beautiful space here as well. And sustainable design is a core part of your operations. Tell us a little bit of how you've integrated climate action and sustainability into your design practices and the trends you're seeing around sustainable design. And I have a little bit of a follow-up question to that, but I'll let you answer that first.
So there's a lot of different ways that we talk about incorporating sustainability into our projects. And for me, sometimes it's an issue of scale. If I have designers who want to talk about embodied carbon, or what my very good friend Sarah Neff, I don't think Sarah is here today, at Lend-Lease explained to me one day, instead of calling it embodied carbon, we talk about it as upfront carbon. What's that carbon impact of the build out of a space, the construction of a building? And sometimes it's talking to project teams. They want to do better on carbon. They don't necessarily want to get into the math and the metrics. And I kind of make a sweeping generalization like, hey, the easiest way to start talking about getting carbon out of your design projects is to only specify materials that are manufactured in the country where the project's being built. So we don't need to be shipping, marble from around the world when there's perfectly good and beautiful materials that are very local to us and very great with our economy. So there's those kind of structural changes and challenges I kind of put to a lot of design teams. And then there's other ways when you really get down into projects. If you ever thought about how does building form affect the carbon impact of buildings? And when you think about it, as a building shifts from rectangle to square to octagon to circle, that ratio of building envelope to conditioned space gets more efficient. So you're reducing the amount of envelope that really needs to mitigate that temperature differential, which can become a big part of your energy spend. There's a lot of other, like when we get to an interior, sometimes I tell teams like when I don't know if we have any designers in the room, when you typically plan out an interior, the first thing you do, like for a commercial interior, you're like, okay, there's my elevator core. I'm going to wrap a circulation corridor around the elevator core, and all of my workstations and offices go outboard. Well, if you flip that script and move your circulation out to the perimeter, I can actually take my first light fixture. I can move it 10, 15, 16, 17 feet away from the window. I only need a half a watt per square foot to walk. And I'm doing two things there. I'm actually reducing the amount of energy I'm spending on my internal lighting load. And I'm also saving my client upfront construction dollars because it's less fixtures we're dropping in. And at the same time, because of the advanced codes in California, all of those fixtures have to be daylight responsive, which usually comes with a higher price tag. So I'm complying with the code by actually not installing fixtures in that area. And there's a lot of like stories and strategies like that we actually talk to our design teams. I think probably have like a deck of like 30 or 40 things. Like, here's how we can talk about decarbonizing through design.
As a green building nerd, I get really excited about building envelopes. So it's great to hear that. It's great to hear that. And one of the things I think everyone should take away, especially around embodied carbon right now, is that just by being intentional about looking at, the carbon, the upfront carbon in your project, you can likely reduce that carbon load by roughly about 10%. It starts to, you start to need to dig a little deeper when you want to get above that. But, Gensler and Anthony and folks like that are really leading a lot of that wave. And I've been really surprised and grateful at how quickly we've moved around embodied carbon in the last few years. You go back 5 years ago, there wasn't that many people who really focused on it. And now it's really a core part of approach for a lot of the leading companies. Yes. David, LEDP is the largest municipally owned utility in the country, which I think we don't talk about enough sometimes. It's a big deal. And has recently launched the Comprehensive Multifamily Retrofit or CAMR program. You guys also have a way with acronyms, which is good. And we've talked before just about the importance of energy efficiency as we look at decarbonization. So maybe you could talk for us a little bit about the CAMR program and how it combines that approach with efficiency, how the two are related.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, we're very committed to energy efficiency as a resource for DWP, especially as we move towards decarbonizing the grid. One thing that's important to keep in mind, this is in context, we're looking at getting a lot of new load from transportation electrification and building electrification. And so to the extent that we can reduce conventional loads through energy efficiency, we can free up capacity on our existing system to absorb some of that new load. We can't absorb all of it, but we can absorb some of it. So we don't have to build as much new infrastructure. And that really reduces rate pressures over time, as opposed to maintaining conventional loads where they are and then layering on all this new electrification load that would require massive build out of transmission, generation, distribution, circuit upgrades, all this stuff. We'll still have to do some of that, but it's mitigated substantially if we can continue to drive deep energy efficiency. So all our electrification programs actually try to build on existing efficiency programs. So CAMR, zooming in, comprehensive affordable multifamily retrofits, serves a lot of purposes. It targets our hardest to reach segment, which is low income multifamily. Usually affordable property. It's either officially affordable via deed restrictions or things like that. Affordable property managers, portfolios, WISE properties is one of them, a large one. Or it's naturally occurring affordable housing, which is generally the mom and pops, the older units, the 5-unit, 10-unit, 12-unit buildings that are owned by individuals, typically old under rent control. But in either case, they typically qualify for the program. So serving that market and with deep energy efficiency, and then electrification, and then solar through our community solar. So let me kind of tie this all together, why this really makes sense for this segment. We're still at a point with building electrification where the economics pre and post electrification are fuzzy. Transportation electrification is a done deal. It always pencils at this point. Even if when gas is $4 a gallon or gas is $6 a gallon, and rates are going up a bit, but it's still $2 a gallon equivalent for electric vehicles, for electric transportation. So that pencils. Buildings, it's trickier. Sometimes it does, depending on applications, depending on the climate zone, depending on what they put in. Sometimes it doesn't. And that's the concern, is we don't want to burden our customers with additional energy burden post electrification. So there's efficiency first. That certainly lowers the bill because it's less consumed kilowatt hours. Then there's electrification, which may, and let's just say it does in this particular instance, increase the bill because of the higher electric use and electricity being more expensive than natural gas. Then we follow behind that with offering solar through our community solar program, where we have what's called a virtual net energy metering pilot, by which one system installed on the entire building can be allocated benefit to the tenants, and some to the property owner as well. But it can be allocated. We can allocate the benefit to the tenants to bring that back down, and overall have a cost-effective installation for both the building owner and the tenants. So that kind of rings that bell in terms of getting it decarbonized and making the economics work for the building owner and the tenant. The third piece, so this one of the things that really excites me is there's a lot of policy imperatives we serve with this program. The third piece is creating skilled job opportunities for the local workforce, career sustaining job opportunities. We've specified that the customers, to get the incentive, must hire contractors who are level playing field with trades. They don't have to be trade contractors. They don't have to be IBW contractors. But on this particular job, if they're going to get the CAMR rebate, they have to act like they are. And that means prevailing wage, skilled and trained requirements, C10 license, the like. We suspect that most contractors will already be trades contractors, but we're also hoping that we'll find contractors that see a business model here that may have been on the fence about joining up, becoming a signatory to IBEW or the other trades, and see a sustained opportunity here. And this pushes them over and they become signatories. I do have to give a shout out at this point to Tommy Favai, who's in the audience right there. He's with IBEW Local 11, and he helped us tremendously in drafting those requirements and building those requirements into the CAMR program. But we're very excited about it.
Well, and I want to underscore this point here, the opportunity to create more energy efficiency, to create all electric buildings is an opportunity for economic development for the region. And it is a way to reduce our long-term operating costs if we focus on the efficiency component of it. And if we approach it the right way, and that'll help create, more affordability for all of us long-term, and hopefully healthier spaces as well, which is a critical piece of this. Michelle, to the point of economic development, last year, SCE filed a nearly $700 million building electrification application with the Public Utilities Commission, or PUC, for your 2024 to 2027 programs. The goal of the program is to simultaneously help California reach greenhouse gas reduction goals while reducing costs for customers. If you could tell us a little bit about the program, how it will provide benefits for customers who need it the most, and how it'll help shift the market for appliances like heat pumps. I think this is a really critical component for us right now. And then if you could expand also on kind of the incentives that help align with that as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Great question. So SCE estimates that in order to meet California's carbon neutrality goals, we're going to need to see about 10 million heat pumps installed by 2045. And as we heard earlier, the governor has talked about installing 6 million heat pumps across the state, which is a huge support effort that, actually put a metric to heat pumps, because prior to that, it was very focused on transportation electrification. So our program is really taking a jump out at that. In our service territory, we estimate that we need about 1.6 million heat pumps by 2030. So what Edison has requested from the California Public Utilities Commission is funding to do retrofit programs. Because again, we heard that, retrofit is kind of the beast. That's the area that we really need to focus on. So as Ben mentioned, it's specifically $677 million. And it's actually broken out into 3 different programs. So we have it's called the BE Ready, the Building Electrification Ready program. And we are looking at offering incentives for both space and water heating, as well as for panel upgrades. Because again, we heard that panel upgrades can be a deal breaker, especially when you're adding both HVAC and heat pump water heating. And that actually takes up about 83% of the budget. And then we have what's called our BE Catalina program, which is very similar to BE Ready homes, but it also includes electric cooking and clothes drying. And the reason for that is Catalina, we are the electric, water, and gas utility on that island. And as you can imagine, there are some logistical issues with electrification of the island, not only getting equipment, warehousing equipment, but getting installers on the island. And so the gas is propane. And so we really want to help our Catalina customers start making that transition. And that's about 3% of our budget. And then lastly, we have a small carve out for business, which is our BE business program. And that is focused strictly on heat pump HVAC. And so in total, we are looking at 250,000 heat pumps being installed and roughly 65,000 panel upgrades. And to your question about our vulnerable customers, in order to give them access, we are allocating a minimum of 40% of the budget to our low-income and ESJ communities. And we will be enhancing incentives. So Ben asked specifically about incentives. So for example, heat pump water heaters, we will offer a $1,500 incentive for heat pump water heaters for our low-income ESJ customers. And then for our market rate customers, it's a $1,000 incentive. For HVAC, we are offering $600 per ton of HVAC for our low-income customers, and then $400 per ton for our market rate. And on the building side, we are offering basically prescriptive incentives, and they range from $700 up to $4,000 per unit, depending on the capacity and the type of building. So again, we are very much focused on eliminating as many barriers, but we also have a very short runway. So we are keeping it fairly simple by just focusing on the 2 appliances that use the most energy and cause basically the most carbon emissions from buildings.
And I want to point out here that both David and Michelle are 2 of the really key people in this whole region leading this effort. We can't really electrify the way we'd like to without the right incentive structures in place right now and accelerate fast enough. We run a program called our Green Affordable Housing Program and Green Homes LA, where we're working directly with buildings in low-income communities to help electrify. And I don't think we talk enough about the importance of panel upgrades and how much of a hurdle that is, and the timing around that is so critical. So I'm going to switch a little bit to the IRA. I think the whole definition of IRA has changed for us dramatically in the last 3 years. And so last year, Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act, and that contained nearly $370 billion in new spending and tax breaks for everything from clean energy to transportation electrification to domestic manufacturing to energy efficiency and building electrification. I feel like I can't go a day, maybe even like a half day now, without someone bringing up the IRA and the impacts. And everyone's trying to really figure out, what that means for them, their business. I think one of the things we need to be careful about is people not doing anything right now because they're waiting to see how things play out. And so, Jason, I know you were just at this conference. You know, I think you were getting kind of the lay of the land, the latest updates on the IRA. Maybe you could share with us a little bit about what you're seeing from your space and what you think is the impacts in the IRA. And then I'd like to go to some of our other panelists on that as well.
Yeah, it's sometimes I always say, folks, it's sometimes better to be lucky than smart. So when we realized that when we were creating this product, we realized we wanted to have domestic manufacturing. And that was well in advance of the Inflation Reduction Act being passed. And so there are a couple of benefits as it relates to us. So if you guys want to go to sleep now, this is the best time to go to sleep. This is when JB turns into the banker. So there is the investment tax credit. Investment tax credit was 26%. When the IRA passed, it retroactively went back to 30%. It's Section 48 of the code. The IRA now has a couple of adders associated with that. There is a domestic content adder, there's an LMI adder, and there's also an energy community adder. So you can add 30% more to the 30% existing tax credit. So you can have a tax credit as much as 60%. I'm told it could be as high as 70%. So with respect to us, the fact that we have our headquarters, our manufacturing headquarters domiciled in San Jose, California, and the fact that we have with this particular product, just to give you an example, and I'm a visual person.
Remember not to jump on your solar panels at home, everyone.
Don't do that. No.
Only he's allowed. To do
Only these solar. Thank you very much. Only these solar panels. So when you think of this right here, this material, it's called TPO. That's what I'm holding. That's what's flexible. And TPO is your most popular roof membrane for commercial roofs. So what we did is we infused TPO with photovoltaic technology. And so by doing that and having all of the assembly, all of the manufacturing in the US, we believe there are a lot of folks who are scrambling to do this, but just by happenstance, we qualify for the additional 10% of domestic content. That's why I said it's better to be lucky than to be smart. What we're seeing is I was extremely popular at the InfoCast Finance Conference because there are a lot of the private equity partners who are coming to us saying, hey, geez, we'd like to do business with you. Why is that relevant? If you're investing in a solar system, you can spend $100 you can have a solar system and then you can lease it via a lease or a PPA to a third party when they're buying power. So because you have a tax credit, I'm going to be very simplistic and I won't talk about economic substance tests and all this other stuff because I'll put me to sleep even. So if you're in a world with a 30% tax credit, a tax investor writes a $30 check. The private equity firm writes a $70 check. So you'd rather write a $70 check and get 99% of the value versus writing a $100 check and getting 100% of the value. It's just, simple math. So with us now, because we qualify for the domestic content, or we believe that we're there, instead of writing a $70 check, you now write a $60 check. That $10 is meaningful if you're a private equity firm. What that means is that without anything, and with a government subsidy, your pre-tax and levered return has gone up. So there are a couple of things you can do with that. You can take that and you can either pass it on to the customer via lower PPA rate. I've been in finance a long time. I've never seen bankers pass it on. I'm being facetious, obviously. Or what you can do, you can, facilitate better wages for all of the inputs that go into the EPC. You can facilitate a better outcome for the customer with a lower rate. And so what we have done in doing this, and you talked about the affordability. So if you think about your traditional, I'm going to give you a little lesson about roofing. So a roof has about, the average roof in the US is about, call it 30 squares. 30 squares is about 3,000 square feet. So 1 square is 100 square feet. Just making sure you guys are getting the math. So the retail price of a roof is about, call it anywhere between $12,000 to $15,000. When you buy traditional rack-mounted solar, and again, I'm not besmirching rack-mounted solar, it can go anywhere from $275 to as much as $4 a watt, somewhere in that general area. So a traditional solar system can cost anywhere between $20,000 to $25,000, somewhere in that general area. If you took a traditional roof and you took our product and you added them together, it's the same as buying a roof plus a traditional rack-mounted solar system, but it's locked into one. And what was super important is that every single conversation I had at the InfoCast, every single conversation, they were like, oh my God, this product looks good. And I don't talk about features and benefits. I don't talk about the phenotype or the look of a product. I talk about how you de-risk. If you're a homeowner, you're engaged in a process, you're in love with solar, a nice salesperson knocks on your door, you're enthused, and lo and behold, you have a leaky roof. That is a deleterious, that is a non-optimal outcome. And when I showed the product to folks, they assumed it was more expensive. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to disavow everyone of the notion that when you engage in solar and you engage more importantly in technology, it should be done at a level where you're thinking about the average consumer. And I say this in that I was raised by a single parent. My mother could barely pay rent, let alone think about solar. So those are other consequences associated with it. But the Inflation Reduction Act is the most consequential legislation. And I think it's super important that when I gave the example of the private equity firms and a very simple example of domestic content, we have to make sure that the subsidy does not go into the pockets of the private equity world, that it goes, and again, I'm not besmirching any private equity folks, I used to be one of them, but it goes in a very systematic way to make it more affordable for the average consumer.
I think that's really important. Michelle, I want to go to you next. You know, how do you see the IRA really impacting some of the incentives you offer, impacting the market around building electrification? Because those things seem intrinsically intertwined to me.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And, you know, consequential legislation, I mean, you couldn't underscore that enough. What's really important to understand is that, again, based on our calculations, the cost of building electrification is in the tens of billions of dollars. It's not just a few billions. And in California, it's a lot of heat pumps. And so what we are really excited about with the IRA dollars is that it's not just dollars that are on the backs of ratepayers. It's spread across taxpayers. Because again, this transition shouldn't be up to just ratepayers to fund. So we're happy about that. But again, it's not enough. And so that's why, programs like what we have proposed to the commission is going to be super important. One of the things that, we saw in 2022 is for the first time, heat pumps outsold gas furnaces across the country. Now, California is behind, the rest of the country, but we're getting there. So that was super exciting. Also, we're seeing just policy really energized. I had heard, and I think there's somebody here from the CEC, that the CEC is potentially considering the incentives from IRA as part of the code calculation for cost effectiveness. So as we advance code, cost effectiveness plays a very big part on what's eventually adopted. And because these dollars are sustained over a longer period of time, they're reliable. And that's super important in a market where such a utility such as us, we have a program, then we take it away. We have a program, we take it away. So having that, sustained funding source, I think is really important. But just, other policies that we've seen evolve. We had talked about CARB, and the CARB scoping plan, very aggressive. I'm not saying that's as a result of the IRA funding, but I think there's just a lot of momentum. Additionally, the CPUC is really stepping up with some really important policies. For example, the elimination of gas line extension allowances. So when, there are new buildings, new projects, there will no longer be gas funded line extension allowances. And additionally, right now in a pending proposed decision, there's a proposal, actually a decision pending that gas incentives are going to be phased out. Small carve out for, certain areas, but those are important policies that I think, again, not necessarily because of the IRA, but I think that really helped to energize some of the movement.
Thank you. And David, LADWP sits kind of an interesting place in terms of, serving gas customers and serving electrical customers. How do you navigate this transition, right, into a different future, and how are you looking at some of the challenges in that transition?
Yeah, so there's a lot wrapped up in that, and I'll also talk our take on the IRA opportunity as well. We work closely with the gas company. The gas company is much bigger than DWP, but they serve almost all of our customers who are on natural gas. But for us, electrification, our main focus on building electrification is to make it happen where it makes sense, with that being a moving target, right? I talked earlier about how there's the pre-post energy burden issue. But then you saw back in December, January, a huge spike in natural gas prices. So that starts to upset that, that kind of rule of thumb that, it's going to increase your utility bill when you electrify because gas is so cheap. Well, historically it has been. Guess what? For 2 months it wasn't. It went through the roof. Is that volatility something that's going to be coming back next year? And if so, how much? That unpredictability, things like that. So that's a factor that we're watching closely. Again, we're conscious of what our customers' bills do after electrification. But here's the big opportunity for an electric-only utility like us. Once those economics work or even achieve parity, doesn't even have to be like the transportation case. It can just be if it's a wash pre-post electrification. So we're not worried about burdening our customers. This is the biggest revenue growth opportunity for electric utilities since the post World War II suburban build out, probably even bigger. That's a revenue shift from one entity to another. And so that opens up a whole lot of possibilities for an electric only utility. And I know Edison's looking at this too. PG&E and San Diego are figuring out how to keep their overall corporation whole if we dial down this one and ramp up this one. But for us, it's a huge opportunity. And then when I say opportunity, remember, we're decoupled just like the IOU. So we're not getting, we don't have shareholders getting profit out of this. We don't do a rate of return. But what it does for us is more kWh through our system managed properly, puts downward pressure on the rates per kWh. It's more efficient. We get better utilization of the grid. So we want that additional kWh flowing through our revenue stream to keep the overall rates low or lower. So that's one thing. But then now to switch gears to IRA and the federal money available to help accelerate this happening. There's a lot of questions there. And so we as a utility, we wouldn't be getting the money ourselves. We're looking at how we help a customer get the money. And I'll give you two examples of areas where we're, struggling is the wrong word, but waiting. We have to see, we're following the information. We're coming up with ideas, but we have to see if those ideas are actually going to stick. And so there's the HERA program, HEEHRA, 20 billion. It's a portion of the $20 billion, I think, in the Infrastructure Act, not the IRA. But that's the one that specifically goes after residential electrification, up to $14,000 per home, $8,000 if you're in a certain income level. It's targeting low, moderate income. Though that's huge, and it's end level incentives, whole building, whole home incentives, rebate dollars. But that program's in development and unlikely to have dollars ready to hit the street until this time next year, 2024. The other piece is the tax credits that have been mentioned, and we're very keen to see those, especially for electrification, heat pump, on the heat pump application side, water heaters, space heating, et cetera. But those also are on hold pending. Well, I'd say they're on hold. They're set for 2024. They'll apply to the 2023 tax year. Now, when they put that through the solar, they said the solar portion of it, the Fed said that'll be back eligible for 2022. Whereas the new heat pump stuff is only eligible for 2023 tax year going forward. Here's why. The IRS already has the rules established around the solar tax credit. They don't have it established around the heat pumps. So they couldn't just launch that, and then this is tax time right now. We're in tax season right now. They couldn't launch it and make it eligible for 2022 stuff. That's why there's a 1-year delay on the heat pump tax credits in IRA. So, we have to navigate a lot of complicated things there. We're not tax advisors. We're not going to be tax advisors. So we're going to be looking for opportunities to partner with third parties who are, so that we can tie these programs together alongside our rebate and the tax credit to really shrink that first cost to make these for the customer to make these investments.
Thank you, David. And I may go a little bit off script here in that it seems like there's a big financing opportunity here, right? With the revenue growth potentially from electrification for DWP, for SCE, and I will say that a lot of the challenges we hear are really around the panel upgrades, the transformers. Just any thoughts around that? Because that's what I hear is really blocking a lot of progress, especially as we look at fleet electrification. We look at larger commercial portfolios. What do you see there? I'll go to Michelle and then to David. Yeah.
So I will say that we don't have a lot of data on commercial portfolios. I mean, one of the main reasons we're focusing on residential is basically the volume and the fact that we have a lot of data. We are leveraging a lot of the state studies. We have a lot of work to do on the commercial space. And then on the financing side, so I know you're probably talking about, traditional, like, green financing and things like that. There is a CPUC proceeding right now, the Clean Energy Financing proceeding, which is going to be, I'm not entirely sure when a decision is coming. I think it's going to be within the next year or two, but it's looking at different financing programs across different, green energy types of opportunities. And I think it includes both residential and commercial. For us, though, because panel upgrades are incredibly expensive and a huge barrier, we have actually proposed a different type of cost recovery in our portfolio. And I don't want to get too geek out on the utility side, but typically when we offer incentives to our customers, it's called an expense. And we basically recover those costs over the life of the program. It can be very expensive. It impacts rates in a short amount of time. And so what we did was, because panels are such a critical part of building electrification, and because they are so costly, we proposed a kind of a capital recovery. We don't actually own the panels, but we are proposing a similar cost recovery as if it were capital. It's not super popular with our regulators or some of our interveners, but we're taking a bold step to basically say this is what's necessary, and in order to kind of smooth rates over the longer period of time, because again, it's recovered over the life of the equipment, not over the life of the program, because again, it's a 4-year program. And so what we're saying is we want to recover those costs over the life of the equipment. That's how we're trying to manage some of those costs. Our program does not have financing. Again, we're kind of waiting to partner with the Clean Energy Finance Program and existing programs. They need to get better. It's going to be critical. I think it's going to be super important for financing programs, though.
Thank you. And David, if you could maybe give us your flavor of that answer, and then Anthony will probably close with you.
Sure. Yeah. So financing is a piece. The way we look at it is, let's find all the free money first and then see what the gap is. And the rebate and the tax credit, or the federal rebates and the HERA program, let's see what that adds up to, and then let's see what the gap is. So, we've been down the path of trying to line up private financing for energy efficiency programs for quite a while, over a decade, through PACE and other mechanisms to varying degrees of success. In other words, very little. And so, I think the finance piece is important. We're working with Go Green, which is out of the State Department of the Treasury, which seems like it's a platform. It's not a funder themselves, but they try to maintain a stable of funders that are willing to loan into this space. And we're working with them to get our programs promoted, listed, direct customers to those. But the challenge has always been with financing, especially private capital. They don't want, typically, and to use your word, besmirch the industry, but they don't want the rebates and the tax credits to buy down the project, because then they're doing loan origination on smaller projects. They make all their money on big. They want the whole thing to be loaned and interest, and they can package it up in a big $100 million tranche and sell it and things like that. So that they don't want us buying down the project costs. And what happened with PACE was they didn't want that for that reason, and they didn't want the utilities' eyes on doing third-party verification on these projects either. So, frankly, in my opinion, residential PACE was an unmitigated disaster, and you can read the LA Times article series on it a couple of years ago for the details. So that's why, for us, again, focus on what you get from us, what you get from the feds. We want to package that together, and then we want to work with more nonprofit or community-based type and CDI. Community financial CDFIs, thank you, another acronym, that are more mission driven and work through a platform like Go Green to bring that type of mission driven funding into it and fund the loans, and hopefully get more capital from the feds through the $20 billion, some of it's also for loans, kind of get that in there, and let's see how we can do with that type of financing, and really demonstrate, and then see if we can possibly lure private capital from Wall Street. But we got to do this on our terms, not on Wall Street's terms.
So I just want to address one of the things. So I'm not giving the Wall Street perspective. So what we did is when I came into LA and I joined LABC, and Mary Leslie was very welcoming, we brought private capital in. So we brought private capital in via tax credit. So what we did is we said, let's use our tax capacity and let's use that to invest in solar in LA, which is what we did. And let's use that to drive enterprise value because it was super strategic for us. Because not only did we provide the membrane, the waterproofing associated with the roofing materials, we also provided the capital that facilitated the solar. Not only did we do that, we actually created a partnership where we took a pro rata distribution. So we took real risk throughout the term of the contract term. So it wasn't like we came in, bought a tax credit, said, thank you very much, and ran. We're actually in those deals taking pro rata risk for the entire duration of that contract term. And I think that was super important because a lot of my fellow brethren in Wall Street didn't think about it that way. They thought about, hey, very transactional. I think from our perspective, we thought about creating a relationship over a much longer time. And I remember when I came in, Mary said to me, she said, JB, we like your capital. That's great. But what are you going to do on a forward going basis as it relates to helping LA? And I think that's something that we did, which is why I've been invited back time and time again. But, private capital, I think if in our case, we actually were able to get enterprise value by actually investing in a solar transaction and helping that to move forward our roofing materials, but also we think creating a fiduciary, meeting our fiduciary responsibility of waterproofing. Gerardo's back there, and when he was at BlackRock, one of the main concerns that he had, he's still at BlackRock, one of the main concerns was, JB, you're going to put 40,000 penetrations in this roof. What's going to happen? Jonathan Porter developed a product called SolarStrap, which allowed us to, mitigate that risk. So I think if you're working with local partners, you're thinking as a principal, and more importantly, as a fiduciary, you can meet that criteria. If you're not, I agree 100% with what you said. It creates a negative outcome.
So you think you came here to talk about buildings, but it's really all about money. That's the key. I want to close with you, Anthony. When it comes to design, how do you approach all electric buildings differently? And how do you approach the scenario that we've laid out today?
Well, what we're talking to a lot of our clients right now when it comes to all electric, and not all of our, not every developer is really on board with it. And we kind of see where the codes are going, not just what's coming up in April, but what's coming up, when is the moratorium really going to hit? When is that gas pipe that you have in your existing building going to be empty? And a lot of things, what we're telling, like I'm telling a lot of my clients right now, if you're not ready for all electric yet, at least double pipe for future electric switchover. Because the last thing you want to do is 2045, 2040 rolls around and there's no more gas in that pipe. The last thing you want to do is rip apart your existing building infrastructure just to run new lines.
In fact, the code update requires it.
Yeah, it does. And in case you haven't noticed, Ben skipped over me from most of this IRA question and that was by design, because how many of you have your architect on speed dial when you have financing questions? None of you, unless you want to know how much.
Only if I'm looking how to spend money.
Yeah,
usually.
Only if you need to know how much a building costs. But I'm actually was very surprised that you kind of brought up the IBEW and kind of talking about local labor and local materials. We actually did a project for IBEW years ago where it was a client requirement that every single material had to be manufactured in the United States. That was about 10 years ago. It was a very difficult thing to do. It's getting much easier right now with supply chain becoming a lot more transparent, a lot more disclosive. How we're helping our clients navigate a lot of these complexities is how are we simplifying it? I have many designers who I kind of call them, covert. They practice what we call covert sustainability. They only show our clients a palette of finishes that is local, that is responsible, that is sustainable, and say, hey, here's your palette, pick. We're not showing them something that might have to kind of travel around the globe, because it actually starts to tie into a lot of these other strategies our clients can take benefit from. So how do we simplify that to kind of make it easier for them, because they are dealing with a lot of things when they're talking about big projects.
No, that's very true. And hopefully one day we can practice upfront sustainability one day. So closing question here, and apologies for my voice. I'm losing my voice again. I'm not going to last the day. What do you see as the biggest barrier to us advancing building decarbonization. This is a rapid fire question, so let's try to make it, just pick one barrier. I'm going to start with you, Jason. We're going to work our way back. What do you see as the biggest barrier to decarbonizing buildings?
I think the permitting process. I think if we can systematically make that more streamlined, I think it's going to encourage more building practitioners to engage, because it's going to speed up the process by which you go through the whole decarbonization process. I'm using solar in specific.
Thank you. Michelle?
Upfront cost. It's upfront cost, especially when you're trying to transition, our vulnerable communities. It's very expensive. And so that's why we're very focused on helping those communities as much as we can, but also just the awareness of what's needed to make that transition.
Thank you. David?
I would go with the ongoing costs pre-post electrification and decarbonization. I want to point something out. I talked about transportation electrification already being a no-brainer on the operations cost side. And because of that, because that's in place, we're seeing electric transportation adoption starting to go Moore's Law. Not quite. Moore's Law, every 18 months, processing power doubles. We're 2 or 3 years right now, but it's getting tighter and tighter on EV adoption, getting closer and closer to Moore's Law curve. There's no Moore's Law curve in building electrification right now. And that's for a variety of reasons, but the uncertainty about what your ongoing costs after electrification for the purposes of decarbonization are is a big part of that.
I want to find our Moore's Law curve for electrification. That sounds like fun. That sounds like fun to me. Anthony, what's your barrier?
I actually am really excited about the legislation that's going live in April, because we all talk as designers, we talk about, and we really hold up high the net zero energy buildings and the all electric buildings and the things that we're doing for a lot of our clients. But that really represents 1/2 of 1% of the work that's going on. So talking about getting a lot more aggressive with where our codes are going and how they're changing, because what we really need to do to make real change is to lift up the bottom. Like, how are we making that change across every single project? And I think just how do we get more aggressive as codes continue to flourish?
Thank you. Well, I want to say thank you to all of our panelists. I want to say thank you to Mary Leslie and the LA Business Council for having us today. And please get involved. This is, buildings affect everyone. We're all in a built environment at some point in our day. And it's going to take all of us to help make this transition to a cleaner, greener future. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, panelists. And Mary Leslie, would you like to say a few closing words?
Please, I want to introduce David Fink, our Director of Sustainability, who put this event together today. Let's give him a round of applause. And thank Jill and John again, and David.
And that's it. David, you want to say a few words?
I just quickly add that today's event was live streamed and it'll be up on our website and YouTube channel later today. So if there's anything you missed, you can go back and watch it.
Thanks for coming.